You've heard the 4% rule is dead. But here's what nobody tells you. The difference between a 3.9% withdrawal and a 5.7% withdrawal on $1 million portfolio is $18,000 a year. Over 3 decades, that's $540,000. Same portfolio, same retirement, completely different life. That gap isn't a rounding error. It's the difference between widening your lifestyle and quietly shrinking it. If you're within 5 years of retirement, that $18,000 a year question is probably the most important financial decision you'll make. And most people are answering it wrong. Not because they're careless, but because the advice out there keeps pointing them toward a single fixed number, as if one rate works for every household, every market, every decade. It doesn't. The whole one-number mindset is the trap. And today I want to show you what actually works. A system that lets retirees start with a higher withdrawal, protect their essentials no matter what the market does, and stop second-guessing every spending decision. By the end of this, you'll see exactly why Mark and Julie, a real planning scenario I'll walk through step by step, can spend their full planned amount each year without guilt, even if the market drops 30%. As of June 2026, Morningstar's State of Retirement Income Study recommends a starting safe withdrawal rate of just 3.9% for a 30-year retirement with a 90% success probability. On a $1 million portfolio, that's $39,000 a year. But the same study shows that if you use a flexible guardrail system, you can start at 5.7%, $57,000, without increasing the risk of running out. That's an extra $18,000 a year, right from day one. So why isn't everyone using the higher starting rate? Because the safe withdrawal rate is not a fixed number. It moves with 2 variables that change every year: stock market valuations and inflation. Right now, both are working against you. The Shiller-Cape ratio, a measure of how expensive stocks are relative to earnings, is sitting around 37. That's near historically high levels. When stocks are expensive, future expected returns are lower, and inflation, while not at the peaks we saw a few years ago, is still running sticky at around 3.2%. That means your withdrawals have to grow each year just to keep up with the cost of living. A fixed 4% rule set up in 1994 was not designed for this environment. If you're near retirement and you've been hunting for the one safe withdrawal number, don't feel bad. Every other video tells you to find it. That's the trap, not you. Let me show you what this looks like in a real situation. Meet Mark and Julie, both 63, retiring this summer with $1,200,000 saved. Their fixed costs, mortgage plus health care, run $60,000 a year. Social Security won't start until age 70, and when it does, they'll get $3,800 a month combined. That's $45,600 a year. But they're 7 years away from that income. In the meantime, every dollar of essential spending has to come from their portfolio. That's the setup. 7 years, $60,000 a year, no outside income. If the market drops in year 2, they have no way to cut those costs. The mortgage doesn't negotiate. The health insurance premium doesn't care about market conditions. And that's exactly where flexible withdrawal strategies start to break down for households like theirs, because flexibility assumes you have discretionary spending to cut. Mark and Julie don't. Their entire essential floor is locked in. But if you're like Mark and Julie, with 70% of your spending locked into essentials, these flexible withdrawal strategies sound great until you realize you can't slash your budget when the market tanks. That's the problem the Safety First system solves, and I'll show you how it works next. I used to think flexibility was the only answer. Cut back when markets are down, like the textbooks say. That advice sounds reasonable until you're sitting across from someone whose budget is $4,500 a month. Healthcare, mortgage, property taxes, with no line item labeled optional. I was wrong. The real answer isn't to cut better. It's to make the cuts unnecessary in the first place. Here's what actually works. Instead of relying on willpower to reduce spending during a downturn, you build a floor of guaranteed income that covers your essentials regardless of what the market does. Everything above that floor gets managed with guardrails. That's the safety first system, and it completely changes the stress level of retirement. For Mark and Julie, the structure looks like this. Their essentials run $60,000 a year. Social Security doesn't start until age 70 and covers $45,600 annually. That leaves a gap of $14,400 a year for 7 years before Social Security kicks in. $420,000 total from the portfolio just to cover basics during that bridge period. Instead of drawing that $420,000 out of their equity portfolio and hoping the market cooperates, they use a TIPS ladder, Treasury inflation protected securities locked in at a guaranteed value outside of market risk. The $420,000 sits in that ladder. It doesn't go up and down with the stock market. It's there when they need it. That leaves $780,000 in their equity portfolio for growth. Now, that $780,000 gets managed with the guardrail strategy. They start withdrawing at 5%, $39,000 a year. And they set a simple rule: if the withdrawal rate ever climbs more than 20% above their starting rate due to a market drop, they trim spending by 10%. If the portfolio grows and the rate drops more than 20% below the starting rate, they can spend more. I remember sitting at 2 in the morning staring at a spreadsheet trying to model a 30-year retirement at 3.9%, thinking this math only works if nothing bad happens. That's not a plan, it's hope. The moment you separate the guaranteed floor from the growth engine, the math stops feeling fragile. Here's the combined picture for Mark and Julie. Their essential floor is covered. Their growth portfolio starts at $39,000 a year with guardrails. After Social Security begins at 70, their base income never drops below $80,000 a year, even in the worst historical return sequences. If you're within 5 years of retiring and you're tired of videos that assume you can just trim the fat from your budget, subscribe. This channel is built for people who need a system that works even when you can't cut. That's what I'm here to show you. But wait, what if the market drops 30% in the first 3 years? That's exactly what happened to retirees in 2000. Let me show you the scenario most planners ignore. The worst time to retire in the last century was 1966. Stocks were expensive. The CAPE ratio was around 22, which at the time was considered elevated. Then came the inflation wave of the 1970s and early 1980s, double digits, year after year. Retirees who had planned on a fixed withdrawal rate watched their purchasing power shrink while they were forced to pull more dollars from a portfolio that was already bleeding. The 4% rule barely survived 1966. Many fixed-rate portfolios were depleted before their owners reached their late 80s. Bill Bengen, the researcher who developed the 4% guideline, has said directly that inflation is the greatest enemy of retirees. Not market crashes, inflation. Now look at today. The CAPE ratio is sitting around 37. That's significantly more expensive than 1966 was. And inflation, while not at double digits, is running sticky at 3.2%. It compounds every year. Over 30 years, that 3.2% annual increase turns a $60,000 essential budget into something closer to $150,000 in today's dollars. Here's the actuarial piece that most people don't factor in. A 65-year-old woman today has about a 30% chance of living to 95. For a couple, there's roughly a 50% chance that at least one of them lives past 92. That means a 30-year planning horizon is the minimum. Many households need to plan for 35 to 40 years. A withdrawal strategy designed for 25 years doesn't cut it. When you combine a high CAPE ratio, sticky inflation, and a longer planning horizon, a fixed 4% withdrawal becomes a different kind of gamble than Bengen's original research described. You're not using the same math. You're using a version of it that assumes lower returns and higher inflation for longer. So if you retire today with a fixed 4% withdrawal, here's the part that keeps me up at night. The first 5 years will decide everything. Let me show you two paths. Same starting conditions, completely different outcomes. Path 1, Mark and Julie retire in 2026. Draw a fixed 4% from their full $1,200,000 portfolio, $48,000 a year, plus a small inflation adjustment. In year 2, the market drops 30%. Their portfolio falls to roughly $840,000. But they still need $49,000 that year to keep up with inflation, so they sell into the drop. Year 3, the portfolio is already weakened. Year 5, they're working with around $680,000. On that trajectory, the portfolio is likely exhausted well before they reach their late 80s. That's sequence of returns risk. And it's not theoretical. It happened to retirees who left the workforce in 2000. The early losses are permanent. Path 2, same couple, same year, but with the two-bucket system. Their essentials, $60,000 a year, are covered by the tips ladder. When the market drops 30% in year 2, they don't touch the equity portfolio. They don't sell into a declining market. The ladder just keeps paying. Meanwhile, the growth side of the portfolio, the $780,000 in equities, drops to around $546,000. At that point, the guardrail kicks in. Their withdrawal rate has climbed to about 7.1%, which is well above the trigger point. So they apply the guardrail rule and cut the variable withdrawal by 10%, from $39,000 down to $35,100. Here's what that means in real terms. Their total income is still $60,000 in guaranteed essential coverage, plus $35,100 from the growth portfolio, $95,100 in total. Their original plan was $99,000. They gave up $3,900. Not a vacation, not a lifestyle overhaul. A $3,900 trim. Guyton Klinger guardrail research, backed by Morningstar's 2025 study, shows this type of system achieves over 90% success rates for 30-year retirements, even at starting withdrawal rates of 5 to 5.5%. The structure does the work. You're not relying on willpower or perfect market timing. You still have choices. You don't have to spend your whole retirement on a tight budget. The system exists. You just have to build it before the storm hits. So how do you actually build it? There are 3 steps you can take this week. Most people skip the first step entirely. They calculate a withdrawal rate off their total portfolio, forgetting that half their expenses are locked in and non-negotiable. Then when the market drops, they're forced to cut the vacation money they were counting on. Or worse, they don't cut at all, and their portfolio depletes faster than the math ever predicted. These 3 steps are how you avoid that. Step 1, calculate your essential floor. Add up every expense that doesn't flex. Housing payment, healthcare premium, utilities, food, property taxes. Not what you hope to spend, what you must spend. For Mark and Julie, that number is $60,000 a year. Then compare that to your guaranteed income. For most people, that's Social Security and possibly a pension. Mark and Julie's Social Security at age 70 gives them $45,600 a year. Their essential gap, the amount the portfolio has to cover before Social Security starts, is $14,400 a year. Over 7 years, that's $100,800 from the portfolio just to close the gap, on top of whatever Social Security doesn't cover during the bridge period. Once you know your essential floor and your guaranteed income, you know exactly what needs to be protected with certainty and what can be left in growth mode. Step 2. Build the cash buffer. Keep 12 to 24 months of essential expenses in a high-yield savings account or short-term bonds, separate from your investment portfolio. For Mark and Julie, that means $60,000 to $120,000 set aside. Bill Bengen himself, the researcher who created the 4% guideline, recommends this exact approach. A 1 to 2 year cash cushion that insulates you from having to sell equities in the early years of a bear market. I'll be honest, when I first ran Mark and Julie's numbers, I was so focused on the withdrawal rate that I completely forgot to include their $800 a month health insurance premium. That one line item adds $9,600 a year to their essential floor. It changes the whole analysis. That's why I now always start with essentials first, before I ever touch the portfolio math. Step 3. Set guardrails for the growth portfolio. Use the 20% rule. If your current withdrawal rate rises more than 20% above where you started, because the portfolio dropped, reduce your withdrawal by 10%. If the portfolio grows and your rate drops more than 20% below where you started, you can increase spending by 10%. You write it down before you retire. You agree on it with your spouse or whoever shares your finances, and then it runs automatically. No advisor required, no real-time decisions under pressure. For Mark and Julie, the starting rate on the $780,000 growth portfolio is 5%, which means $39,000 a year. The upper guardrail triggers above 6%. The lower guardrail triggers below 4%. When those lines are written into a simple plan document, every possible market scenario has a pre-decided response. That's what removes the panic. 3 steps. Your floor, your buffer, your guardrails. That's the whole structure. There's a reason the 4% rule became religion. The human brain wants certainty. When you find a number, any number, and anchor to it, every new piece of information gets filtered through that anchor. 4% feels safe because it has a name, a history, and decades of people repeating it. But here's what anchoring actually does in retirement. If you've spent years believing 4% was the golden rule, and now every article says it's dead, you don't know which direction to adjust. Do you go lower and live on less? Do you go higher and risk running out? The anchor doesn't give you flexibility. It just gives you something to be confused about. If this sounds familiar, if you've been trying to pin down the one right number, that's not a sign you missed something. You've been given a rule that was never designed to be a rule. Bengen himself said his research was intended as a starting point for planning conversations, not a permanent withdrawal rate for every retiree in every market. Think of it like driving. You don't set cruise control to 65 miles per hour and hold it through mountain passes and snowstorms and construction zones. You adjust. A dynamic withdrawal system works the same way. It has a starting point and it responds to conditions. Here's a simple exercise. Before you retire, write down 3 scenarios on paper. In a good market year, you spend a certain amount. In a bad market year with guardrails triggered, you spend a smaller amount. In an exceptional year, you give yourself permission to spend more. Once it's written, the anxiety shrinks. You've already made the decisions. You're not negotiating with yourself every quarter. The calmest retirees I've encountered aren't the ones with the most money. They're the ones with a written plan for every scenario. That's where we end today. Here's where we are. The retirement math is worse today than it was in 1994. High stock valuations and sticky inflation mean a fixed 4% withdrawal carries more risk than most people realize. The answer isn't to shrink your life to a lower fixed rate. The answer is to stop relying on a fixed rate at all. A safety-first system separates your guaranteed essentials from your growth portfolio. It protects your floor from sequence of returns risk. And with guardrails on the growth side, you can start at 5% and make only minor adjustments when markets get rough. Mark and Julie can spend their full $99,000 a year without guilt. If the market drops 30%, their total income drops by $3,900, not $30,000, not a lifestyle collapse. That's the difference the structure makes. If you're one of the millions of Americans near retirement who can't just cut a line item when things get hard, who have fixed costs, fixed health needs, fixed obligations, this channel is built for you. Hit subscribe and I'll keep showing you the math that works for real lives. I'll see you in the next one.